Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, going to be diving into some role playing stuff, some more tabletop role playing game stuff, because we like to do that around here. Today, going to be talking about a tiny D6 role playing game titled Mecha Monsters. This was actually the first tiny D6 system I got involved in. Uh, been playing actually Mecha Monsters for a while now, and I actually really quite enjoy the game. But let's dive on into it here because this game's got giant stompy robots and city destroying kaiju, and yeah, it's really good to be honest. It is a role playing game from Gallant Knight Games, and actually, I've recently, as I'm recording this, I actually featured this game or discussed this game briefly in a video, actually recommending this game as part of my 6 tabletop RPGs that is not Dungeons and Dragons. So this is even the first time I'm talking about Mecha Monsters, but I'm going to dive into it a little bit more here today. Now, what this is, it is kind of a supplement for Tiny Frontiers. Most of the Tiny D6 games are fairly compatible with one another, and Mecha Monsters is supposed to be an expansion directly for Tiny Frontiers. But with that being said, because of how the rule book is written, organized, and etc., the Mecha and Monsters role playing book is actually also a standalone role playing book. I actually don't use Mecha and Monsters as part of Tiny Frontiers. Instead, I use it as a standalone, which is really nice. Now, the next thing, too, is that's pretty nice, even though it doesn't matter so much for me, but it might for you, is that it only requires D6 dice to play. And, well, D6 dice is pretty easy to come by. You can find them at Dollar General, you can find them at your local Walmart, you can find packs of them. I can actually get packs of them at the local Dollar General and my local grocery store. So it's pretty easy to come by D6 dice. Almost every board game out there has D6s in it. Doesn't matter so much for me because I play Dungeons Dragons, so I have a huge amount of various dice up to D20. Now, when playing the game, first you're going to actually create your mech jock. If you're playing a mech, you're going to create a mech jock. It's actually really simple. There's not a whole lot there for the mech jock himself, but there is rules and information there for creating the mech jock. And then you're also going to create the mech. Now, that's where it gets a little bit more complex because you have different types of platforms for creating your mech, as well as you have different types of weapon systems and etc. for creating your mech. So, realistically, while the jock himself is the player character, the mech is realistically the star of the show because the mech has all the rules, well, realistically, all the complex rules needed for playing the game and the equipment. And then you also can create kaiju with the rules, which is really cool. So, the nice thing about how the system is set up is it's generic enough that if you want to create an atlas, and I would know because I actually did, if you want to create an atlas, you can. Or if you want to create big stompy Godzilla himself, you can. So that's actually really cool, in my opinion, with the rules, which kind of actually what really attracts me to Mecha Monsters, the idea of stomping around as Godzilla, because you can either play actually on the human side of things as the mech jock, but the game is also set up that you can also play as the kaiju. Now, different things you can create with the mechs too is also a transformable mech. For those Robotech fans out there, think of a Veritech where you have different transformable modes. So you have your big stompy robot mode, or you could have like some kind of hybrid jet fighter mode. So I think that's really rad that those rules were included, and realistically, they're not extremely complex. You can also create what is called combiners, which essentially is Voltron or the Megazord from Mega. what is that? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's been a long time since I've seen that. But so you can create combiners, which basically takes multiple mech and make a giant mecha. I don't think there's a combiner kaiju, but there is a rules for transforming kaiju. So that needs to be said as well. There is also some pre-made fodder, not a whole lot to work with, but there's stuff there. Some of your more like generic dinosaurs, tanks, like generic tanks, generic helicopters, things of that nature. And it's just a nice addition to have those, especially if you're going to be doing something along the lines of playing as, I don't know, some kind of Pacific Rim type unit that goes out and kills monsters or the kaiju. Or on the flip side, if you're the big giant stompy Godzilla, more likely units that you're going to encounter first is going to be fodder. And the other cool thing about the system is it has a random city and terrain generator. So basically, it's just roll some D. There's a couple charts there. Roll some D6s, and basically, it helps you create the city for your mechs and kaiju to stomp around in and to battle in. So that's kind of a really cool thing. Now, I only have mecha and monsters in the PDF. With that being said, the PDF is actually pretty well bookmarked that you can jump around pretty easily from section to section with very little trouble. So when they put together the PDF, they did a very good job there. Also, in the book itself, there is pre-made settings. It kind of sets things up and gives you like setting ideas of how to set up different settings, as well as some of the settings even has special rules in itself. I really like that because if I just want to grab and go and I really don't want to sit there and create my own setting, I can flip this XYZ page and there'll be a setting already there pre-made for me. And there's multiple pre-made settings made by multiple different creators. So this was actually a collaboration project with a few different creators involved. Now, when it comes to the price, I feel the price is actually pretty good for what you get. Now, Mecha and Monsters Evolved, which is the most current edition, goes for $20 as a PDF. The first edition goes for $14 as a PDF. Now, I only have the original version, the first edition, if you will, as a PDF. So I really don't know the rules differences. If there's a lot between the original and the evolved version, I would actually like to peer into the evolved version just to see if there is actually major differences. I really wish I had both editions so I could tell you which one was better. The one thing I can tell you for sure is going by the website or Drive Through RPG, there's essentially additional rules, some rules clarifications, and things of that nature in Mecha and Monsters Evolved. So I would say for the additional $6, that's probably what you should go with, unless you already have Mecha and Monsters, and then maybe it's not going to be so worth paying $20 to get the most revised edition of Mecha and Monsters. Now, with that being said, the game itself does not require a whole lot of books. It's essentially one book, unless you also want to add in Tiny Frontiers, and then it's two books. Now, of course, because it uses the Tiny D6 system, it's pretty compatible across multiple systems. So, actually, interestingly enough, I did see some people discussing about doing Monsters versus Cowboys, where they were going to take Tiny Gunslingers, which I haven't dove into. I don't know much about Tiny Gunslingers, and combine it with more or less the monster section of Mecha and Monsters. I really don't know how well that would work out, but you know what? That does sound like a cool idea to me. Now, the next thing is, too, is because it is a tiny D6 system, it is not overburdened with rules, unlike compared to Dungeons and Dragons or Star Trek Adventures. Now, with that being said, though, there's also a downside to that, that sometimes you're just going to have to make the call yourself, that there's no rule there to maybe explain what the call should be for that type of situation that you encounter during your role playing game. But on the other side too, if you're into kind of creating house rules and making your own best judgments, then this is honestly, in my opinion, the way to go. And with that being said, it's an easy to learn system. And this system itself leads to a lot of creativity because it's got more or less a lot of building blocks to work with without a lot of pre generated material. Now, some people might find that as as a flaw because they're more used to the crunchy rules heavy games like Dungeons and Dragons or Star Trek Adventures or Star Wars D20, where a lot of this stuff is already pre-made for you. With this game, you're going to have to create a lot of your own ideas, especially your kaiju and your mechs. But with that being said, that leads to the kaiju and the mechs being essentially more, how would I want to put it, more unique. I feel for this type of game that you should actually have a large amount of unique kaiju. Like just example, you have your Godzilla, you have your King Kong, you have Mothra, you have King Ghidorah, so on and so forth. And then you also have some fodder in there as well, basically like Skull Island has dinosaurs. So that might be something you throw in there, as well as the same way with the mechs, where if you look at Pacific Rim, there's multiple different variants of the different mechs in Pacific Rim, and essentially they are the unique characters. They're the stars of the show. So you're going to have to create those yourself, but they are your unique NPCs, while the game actually already has the pre-made fodder made for you. Now, compared to other tiny D6 games, this is a thicker book, leaning more towards 200 pages. Actually, I think it's just over 200 pages for Mecha and Monsters. I'm not sure about Mecha and Monsters Evolved. There's probably, some more pages to that because of the increased increased rules and, well, new rules and, rules clarifications and things of that nature. But even at 200 pages, it's still pretty good. It's still thinner than a D&D book, to be honest, because like D&D books, you start ranging towards the 300 pages. I have some RPGs that are closer to 400 pages in their books. So realistically, the page count's not bad, and realistically too, you're only using like the first half, first one third of the book, because that's where they create the mecha and the kaiju creation is, and then there's like a third of the book, if you will, maybe less, that is actually pre-made settings that you can work with for your Mecha and Monsters campaign. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to have to say I actually enjoy this system. I enjoy Mecha and Monsters, and I actually do recommend Mecha and Monsters if you're looking for this type of game, because it can be actually quite fun. And in all honesty, it just works. Anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up today's review at that. Hopefully, you all enjoyed my review of Mecha and Monsters, and have yourself a wonderful day.